My husband thought it'd be hilarious to abandon me in some forgotten Italian town. Let's see if she finds her way back, he laughed, speeding off without a second thought. I never came back. A month later, he finally found me. In Spain, where I am already carving out a new life. Let's see if she finds her way back, Lucas chuckled again, his voice slicing through the quiet evening as he slammed the car door shut. I watched in disbelief as the taillights of our rental car faded into the distance, swallowed by the curve of a narrow cobblestone street. I stood there frozen, still mid-sentence, completely stunned. The argument we'd been having outside that little cafe felt suddenly pointless, overshadowed by what he'd just done. He's coming back, I whispered to myself, half hoping, half praying, as people nearby glanced over from their sidewalk tables. He's just trying to scare me. But as the minutes dragged on and the sky darkened above a town I couldn't even pronounce, that tiny knot of fear in my gut grew tighter. I never thought it would go this far when I'd asked him not to drink so much at lunch. His old college friends were in town, celebrating their yearly guys' trip, and I'd been the awkward tag-along. They were the ones egging him on. When I said we should head back to the hotel, Dylan raised his glass and said, "Man, she's always trying to control you," before ordering another round. When I got up to leave, Lucas stumbled out after me. He was slurring his words, but his anger was crystal clear. The fight escalated fast, with things we'd been holding back for years coming to the surface. "You've got your passport in your purse, right?" he sneered as he got behind the wheel. "Then you'll figure it out. You're so smart, always telling me what to do." And just like that, he was gone. By the time night fell, the town didn't feel charming anymore, it felt cold and unfamiliar. I counted what little cash I had left, €100 and $20. Not even close to enough for a flight home. Maybe enough for one night in a cheap room. My credit cards were with Lucas, he'd offered to carry them earlier when my purse got too full, and I hadn't thought twice about it. I found a rundown little place above a bakery. The room was tiny and very simple. The older woman who led me up the stairs didn't speak a word of English, but she gave me a gentle smile. "He blocked me," I muttered, staring at my phone in disbelief. I'd tried calling Lucas a lot of times, and every call went straight to voicemail. My texts showed as delivered, but he never replied. I tried Dylan. Then Peter. I even went down the list and called every single guy who had been in that car. Blocked. Every one of them. A chill ran through me as I realized this hadn't been some angry, spur-of-the-moment mistake. It was intentional. A planned embarrassment. That night, I barely slept. I kept checking my phone. Hoped he'd show up, say it was just a terrible joke, and we'd move on. I just wanted it to be over. I wanted to go back to our perfectly curated life in Philly. Lucas was the successful architect. I was the devoted wife who'd put her own design career on pause to manage our house and keep up appearances. But he didn't come back. The next day, I spent as little as I could. I bought one sandwich and walked the edges of town, scanning hotel lobbies and cafes for signs of our tour group. By that evening, I accepted it. They'd gone ahead with the trip and left me behind. On the third day I stood outside a little pawn shop, staring at my hand. I slipped off my wedding ring, the same one Lucas had upgraded for our anniversary. A 2-carat diamond, meant to replace the simple gold band we'd started with. The shopkeeper gave me a fraction of what it was worth, but it was just enough for whatever came next. The bus station was almost empty. The glowing departure board listed cities I'd only dreamed of visiting. I spotted an overnight route to Turin, one that connected to buses. Places far enough away that Lucas and his friends would never think to look for me, if they even bothered. "Where you go?" asked the ticket agent, an older woman with gentle eyes who'd been watching me stare at the departure board for almost 20 minutes. "Spain," I said. And just like that, the decision clicked into place. As far as you can get me, somewhere on the coast. 16 hours later, I stepped off the bus, every muscle in my body aching from the cramped seats and tension I'd carried the whole way. The air smelled like sea salt and olive trees. Whitewashed buildings stretched along the hillside of a coastal village whose name I couldn't even begin to pronounce. My phone had died somewhere back at the border. I was starving, drained, and the weight of everything that had happened, whether done to me or chosen by me, pressed heavy on my shoulders. I wandered toward what looked like the center of town, my vision blurry from exhaustion. Emotional whiplash had left me scraped raw inside, swinging between fury at Lucas, fear for what came next, and something else I hadn't expected, a flicker of freedom. I had just enough euros left to cover maybe 2 nights in the cheapest room I could find. After that? No plan. No friends. No real grasp of the language beyond please and thank you. Still, as the sun dipped into the sea, painting water in pinks and gold, a strange kind of peace settled in my chest. For the first time in years, I felt still. Lucas had tried to teach me a lesson. Instead, he accidentally set me free. The next day, the sun was relentless. I wandered farther from the village, feet blistered in sandals meant for sightseeing, not walking for miles. My water was long gone, and between the heat, the hunger, and everything I'd bottled up, the world began to sway. It almost seemed fitting, left behind in one foreign country, now collapsing alone in another. I let my eyes close, finally surrendering to the exhaustion. A woman's scream broke through the haze, followed by strong, weathered hands gently turning me over. I blinked up into a face creased with years, her eyes wide with concern. She spoke quickly in Spanish, patting my cheeks and offering a small canteen. The water brought me back just enough to sit up, even though my head still spun. "Isabel," she said, pointing to herself. "Margaret," I replied weakly, mimicking her gesture. She helped me to my feet, surprisingly strong for her size, and pointed toward a small farmhouse tucked between the olive trees. With a few simple hand motions, she told me to come with her. I didn't have the energy to argue. Inside, the kitchen smelled like rosemary and thyme, with something hearty bubbling on the stove. She settled me at a worn wooden table and called out in Spanish. A moment later, a man with a sun-darkened face and a silver mustache appeared in the doorway, drying his hands with a towel. "Mateo," Isabel said, pointing to him. He gave me a cautious nod, curious but not unfriendly. That evening passed in a blur. I did my best to explain, using a few words, wild hand gestures, and eventually just tears. Isabel listened like she understood every bit of it, even though I knew she couldn't. Mateo stayed quiet but kind, occasionally asking questions Isabel translated the best she could. They gave me their extra room, a small, clean space with white walls and a handmade quilt over a narrow bed. I was too drained to protest. I laid down and fell into the deepest sleep I'd had in weeks. I woke to the sound of roosters and the smell of fresh bread. At the foot of the bed, I found clean clothes, a soft cotton dress and a cardigan that looked old but had been freshly washed. They hung loosely on me, but it felt good to shed the clothes I'd been wearing since Italy. Isabel smiled when she saw me and immediately served up strong coffee with thick bread, olive oil, and honey. In the daylight, as the fog in my brain lifted, a wave of embarrassment hit me. These strangers had taken me in, fed me, clothed me, no questions asked. I knew I had to thank them properly, to offer something in return, to move on. Using a mix of simple English and the translation app on my now charged phone, thanks to a dusty adapter Mateo dug up, I tried to explain. I told them I was grateful and that I planned to head back to the village. But Isabel's face fell the second I said it. She shook her head firmly, pointing out the window where the rain had started to fall. Then she gestured toward my blistered feet. "Stay," she said. One of the few English words she seemed to know. "Rest." She led me to the fireplace mantel and opened a small wooden box filled with old photographs. Her hands trembled as she pointed to one of a young woman who had her same eyes and Mateo's smile. "Camila," she said quietly. Then she pointed far away, in the direction of somewhere I couldn't see. "New Zealand." "No sea," she added softly. And just like that, I understood. Isabel had seen a reminder of her daughter in me, someone to fill the ache of a missing presence in their home. My heart ached for her. For them. I gave her a small nod and quietly hung my purse back on the hook by the door. Each day after that, I found myself easing into the rhythm of their life, their quiet, simple, healing life on the farm. The work was physical, completely different from the neat, scheduled life I used to lead in Philly. There were no yoga classes or boutique gyms out here, just dirt under my nails and muscles I didn't even know I had crying out in protest. Blisters formed on my hands, and every evening I ached in places I'd never felt sore before. But as the days passed, that soreness started to fade. My strength returned, little by little. And something else began to change too. The endless loop of thoughts about what had happened to me, about being left behind, started to slow down. My brain, always spinning, began to quiet. Nights were spent on the porch, Isabel knitting beside me, Matteo puffing gently on his pipe. There was a stillness in those evenings, something I hadn't known I needed. The pain of Lucas's betrayal hadn't disappeared, but it no longer felt like the final chapter. Maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something else. 2 weeks after I'd arrived, Isabel and I were sitting together, shelling peas from the garden. She paused for a moment, studying my face with a thoughtful expression, then asked, her English improving with each day, "Home? You want go home?" She made a simple motion with her hand, pointing out toward the world, then back toward America. The question hit me harder than I expected. Home. Just hearing the word brought up our polished brownstone, perfect furniture, curated decor. But it also brought Lucas into sharp focus. His helpful control over our money, which left me without financial independence. His subtle push to distance me from friends. His quiet dismissal of my dreams to return to work. The tears came fast. And with them, the words, spilling out of me in a rush of English that Isabel couldn't understand, but somehow still felt. I told her everything. About the betrayal. About the slow erosion of who I was, done in small, quiet ways over years. About the shame of being left behind like a forgotten suitcase. She didn't interrupt. Just covered my hand with hers, her thumb gently brushing against my skin. When I finished, she pointed to her heart, then to the farmhouse around us, and finally to me. The message was simple, but powerful: you belong here, if you want to stay. I looked toward the olive grove, then back at her. Work? I said, mimicking Matteo's movements from the garden. I stay. I work. Her smile lit up her whole face. She gave my hand a squeeze and went right back to shelling peas, as if we'd just agreed on dinner plans, not a complete change of course in my life. That decision marked the start of my real education in olive farming. My first few tries? A mess. Twigs, leaves, barely any olives. Matteo corrected me patiently, never harsh. Sorting the olives was just as intense. Under the shade of a pergola, we sat at a long table and sorted every single olive by hand, perfect ones for the premium oil, slightly bruised ones for second press, and damaged ones for soap. Isabel watched me closely at first, correcting with soft taps or gestures, but over time, her corrections became fewer. I was learning. You learn fast, Matteo said one night, his English a little stronger now, just like my Spanish was getting better. It was the biggest compliment he'd ever given me, and it filled my chest with warmth. The food we ate was nothing like what I'd grown used to. Everything was fresh, simple, real. Vegetables pulled straight from the dirt. Eggs from the coop that morning. Goat cheese from the neighbors down the hill. No preservatives. No packaged sauces. Just olive oil, lemon, and herbs from the garden. One morning, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror above the bathroom sink, and for a second, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. My skin I weighed less, I felt more solid somehow. Like I finally took up space in my own life. On a rainy afternoon, Isabel sat me down with a basket of yarn and knitting needles. She showed me how to cast on and patiently helped me through every dropped stitch. My first scarf was lumpy and uneven, but it was mine. I'd made it with my own 2 hands. And I wore it with more pride than the designer cashmere Lucas had once given me for Christmas. 3 months in, having worked for only food and shelter, Isabel approached me one morning with Matteo at her side. Without a word, they led me to the small stone building where we processed the olives. Inside, they showed me the racks of oil bottles, the soap bars we'd wrapped, and the jars of preserved olives from our harvest. Market day, Isabel said, pointing to the calendar. The village market was buzzing when we arrived, farmers, craftspeople, tourists all weaving through colorful stalls. Isabel and Matteo set up a simple table and arranged the products with quiet pride. Then, to my surprise, they placed me at the front. "You talk," Isabel said, motioning with a smile. So I tried. My Spanish was still broken, their English limited, but we made it work. There was confusion, laughter, a lot of pointing, but by the end of the day, our table had done well. As we packed up, Isabel pressed a small envelope into my hands. "Your part," she said gently. That night, I slipped the envelope under my pillow. More than once, I reached over to touch it, needing to feel it there. In over a decade of marriage, Lucas had quietly taken over our finances, for convenience, leaving me with credit cards tied to accounts he controlled. This envelope was the first money I'd made, and kept, for myself in years. As I drifted off to sleep, it hit me, I hadn't thought about Lucas at all during the market. I'd been too focused on practicing Spanish phrases, chatting with customers, and taking pride in our products. The space he used to occupy in my thoughts was slowly being filled with something real, olive groves, homemade bread, and the growing sense that I was capable of much more than he ever let me believe. The next week, Isabel and Matteo invited me to dinner at the village taverna. It was the first time I'd been out in public since arriving. The place was packed and lively. Over grilled fish and local wine, Matteo cleared his throat and leaned forward. "Margaret, we want to talk business," he said carefully in English. Isabel reached across the table, resting her hand on mine in reassurance. "We old now," she said, glancing at Matteo. She looked down, then back up. "No children here. Camila, not coming back." Matteo nodded. "We think, retire soon. 2-3 years. He gestured to the grove with a wide sweep of his hand. "But trees, 200 years old. Need young hands." My breath caught. Was this really happening? "You learn fast," Isabel added, smiling. "You work hard. We teach you everything." Then she held out her hands, like she was offering me something real and solid. "Business, yours." I didn't know what to say. I was stunned. They barely knew me, a stranger who'd washed up on their doorstep only months ago, and yet here they were, offering me a future I hadn't dared to dream about. But I don't know enough," I said quietly. "You learn," Matteo said firmly. "We teach. No rush." That night, everything changed. I wasn't just a guest anymore. I wasn't just helping out. I was being trained. I was being trusted. My real apprenticeship began. Each morning, Matteo took me through new parts of the grove, showing me how the soil changed the taste of the oil, how to spot signs of disease before it spread, how to time each harvest to bring out the best flavor. Isabel taught me the business side, ledgers she kept by hand, and simple spreadsheets. Her record-keeping was basic, but it worked. Still, I saw ways I could help. Ways I could contribute. Even after long days of physical labor, I found myself drawn to the glow of the old laptop in the evenings. I started digitizing Isabel and Matteo's systems, organizing inventory, tracking sales, and creating simple tools that made everything easier to manage. "Look," I told Isabel one night, showing her how to sort the spreadsheet by market and oil variety. She leaned in, eyebrows raised, watching patterns unfold right before her eyes. I was invited to the baptism of the butcher's granddaughter, my first real village celebration. I stood quietly in the back of the little church, emotions rising unexpectedly. When the service ended, the elderly priest made a point to greet me. In slow, careful English he said, "You bring new life to Old Grove." His kind eyes twinkled. "Good for village." Young people leave for Barcelona, for America. Village needs new blood. I'd spent so much time building a life here that I'd shoved thoughts of my old one into some dusty corner of my mind. It seems like no one is waiting for me. My parents passed away a few years ago. And friends. Lucas always found polite reasons why this or that person wasn't good for me. Why staying close to my old friends was inconvenient. Why colleagues weren't real friends anyway. My phone, I've used it for pictures. But I haven't opened email, or old accounts. I didn't want to see what might be waiting. Finally I found courage to look to close the door properly. After helping Isabel prepare dinner, I went to my room, pulled out my old phone, and connected to the farmhouse's simple Wi-Fi. My hands trembled as I powered it on and opened my long-abandoned inbox. Hundreds of unread emails poured in. I scanned the senders, heart pounding. Messages from old friends caught my eye, the tone shifting from casual check-ins to concerned, even worried. A wave of guilt swept over me. I'd disappeared without a word, not just from Lucas, but from everyone. Then I saw a name I hadn't thought about in a while, my former design mentor. The subject line read, "Job Opportunity." As I opened the thread, I found a series of emails, each more urgent than the last. She'd recommended me for a remote consulting role with a sustainable building company. The last message, sent just 2 weeks ago, said the role was still open. Just as hope stirred in my chest, another name froze my fingers. Lucas Bennett. Subject line, "I know where you are." The email had come in only hours earlier. My heart pounded as I opened it. Margaret. It's taken months, but I finally tracked you down. I know you're in that back village. This has gone on long enough. I'm coming to bring you home and put an end to this tantrum. My flight lands in Barcelona on Thursday. Be ready. 3 days. 3 days before he expected to arrive and, what? Collect me? Like a suitcase that got left behind? The room spun. Fury, panic, and disbelief crashed into me all at once. After everything, he thought he could just show up and drag me back? I stumbled downstairs, phone still clutched in my hand. Isabel looked up from the open ledger on the kitchen table, her smile fading the moment she saw my face. Bad news from America, she asked softly. Lucas, I finally managed. He's coming. Thursday. Isabel's expression sharpened ever so slightly. Without saying a word, she reached beneath the ledger on the kitchen table and pulled out an envelope, sliding it toward me. Good timing, she said. Was waiting for the right moment. Inside were official documents, my name written alongside Isabel's and Mateo's, in both Spanish and English. I scanned the words, my heart catching in my throat. Partnership agreement, Isabel explained gently. 1/3 business. Not someday, now. Tears blurred my vision. This wasn't just kindness. This wasn't just a roof over my head or some casual apprenticeship. It was real. A stake in something lasting. Not charity, but recognition. A place I had earned. You choose what happens Thursday, Isabel said firmly, tapping the papers. You have home here. Business here. Friends here. She nodded toward the phone still clutched in my hand. That man, he no longer decides. The truth in her words settled over me like a warm, grounding weight. For the first time since Lucas drove away and left me alone in Italy, I wasn't just surviving, I was rooted. Lucas might be on his way, but he wasn't coming back to the same woman he left behind. The next few days passed in a kind of focused blur, not the kind of preparation Lucas would expect. No suitcase packing, no waiting at the door. Just steady, quiet action. I visited Paloma, the local lawyer, and together we drafted divorce papers in both Spanish and English. I reached out to my old design mentor and told her I was ready to accept the remote consulting job. I even found the courage to write to friends I'd disappeared on, brief explanations, no apologies, just honesty. Then Thursday came. The sky was clear, the kind of perfect summer blue only Spain seems to offer. I was in the shed with Matteo, testing a batch of fresh olive oil, when I heard it, an unfamiliar engine rolling up the gravel drive. Isabel appeared in the doorway, calm but watchful. "He is here," she said softly. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady as I wiped them on my apron and walked outside. He didn't see me at first, which gave me a few seconds to breathe. This man, in tailored chinos, crisp button-down, shoes better suited for a boardroom than a farm, looked strangely out of place. Smaller, somehow, in the shadow of ancient olive trees and sun-bleached stone. "Lucas," I said evenly. He turned and for a moment, pure disbelief crossed his face. His eyes traveled over me, my worn boots, sun-browned skin, hair pulled back in a simple twist. I watched the recognition flicker, then falter. "My God, Margaret. What happened to you?" he said, voice laced with that familiar disapproval. That tone used to unravel me. Now it barely registered. "Life happened," I said. I walked closer, not too close. "What are you doing here?" "I've come to bring you home. This has gone on long enough, don't you think?" "Whatever point you were trying to make." Behind me, I sensed movement, Isabel and Matteo stepping out of the house. They just stood there, steady and silent. Lucas looked at them. "These the people you've been staying with? Are they keeping you here?" "These people are my family now," I said. I gestured to the grove around us. "And I'm part owner now. I have a business here." His face twisted in disbelief. He shook his head. "I admit, I shouldn't have left you in Italy. It was stupid. I was drinking. I've said I'm sorry. Can't we just go home?" "You've said you're sorry?" I asked, my voice calm. "When? How is tracking me down and telling me to pack up an apology?" His jaw clenched. The charm cracked. "Fine," he snapped. "I'm sorry. I left you in Italy. It was childish. It was wrong. There, I said it. Happy? Why now, Lucas?" I asked, looking him straight in the eye. "Why look for me now?" He hesitated. Glanced again at Isabel and Matteo. "Can we talk about this in the car?" "They don't speak English," I replied. "And I'm not hiding anything." He looked away. Friends, clients started asking questions. "People notice you're not at the house. It looks bad." "We built a life together," he said, sharper now. "A beautiful home. Financial security. Respect. What more could you possibly want?" "I wanted to feel like a whole person," I said. "To have a voice. To make choices. I found that here, in a place you think is beneath me." "This isn't you," he said, desperation rising. "The Margaret I know wouldn't choose hard labor over comfort. Wouldn't choose this." "You're right," I said, meeting his gaze. "That woman, the one you knew, she didn't survive Italy. The woman standing in front of you made new choices." At that moment, Isabel stepped forward and gently placed something in my hand, the partnership papers. She didn't speak, but she knew this was the moment. I unfolded them and held them out toward Lucas. "I have legal ties here now," I said, holding the papers up. "A business partnership. Responsibilities. People who see me for what I do, not how I look or who I know." His face turned red with frustration. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "Whatever game you're playing." "It's not a game," I said calmly, reaching into my pocket and pulling out the envelope Paloma had prepared. "These are divorce papers, Lucas. Already filed. They include the division of assets." He stared at the envelope like it might bite him. "You can't be serious. You'd throw everything away, for this?" He waved a hand at the farmhouse, the grove, all of it, as if it were worthless. "I'm not throwing anything away," I said. "I'm choosing something better. Something real." I took one more step and placed the envelope in his hand. He didn't move, but his fingers closed around it automatically. His face flickered, first disbelief, then anger, then something closer to bruised pride. "You'll regret this," he muttered. But his voice lacked the sharpness it once held. The threat landed flat. "Maybe I will," I said honestly. "But I'd rather take a chance on a life I choose, than stay trapped in one that was chosen for me." Mateo stepped forward then, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. He didn't understand our words, but he saw the moment for what it was. He looked at Lucas and spoke in Spanish, calm but clear. Lucas looked at me. "What did he say?" "He said the road to Barcelona isn't safe after dark. You should head back now if you want to reach the city by nightfall." Lucas's eyes moved between us. For the first time, he seemed to realize this wasn't a conversation, it was a farewell. Without another word, he turned and walked back to the car, the divorce papers still in his hand. The engine started, and then he was gone, the silver sedan shrinking to a blur on the dusty road. Without speaking, the three of us turned toward the house. There was still work to be done, oil samples to test, dinner to prepare, inventory to review for the next market. Life continued. My husband had once left me in a foreign country, sure I'd be helpless without him. Sure I'd come crawling back. But instead, I found solid ground. I found my own mind and my real life.